The old moss-covered bench was Elias Thorne's favorite spot. It was tucked away in a quiet corner of the community park, half hidden by a stand of ancient, gnarled oaks. From here, he could watch the life of the park unfold in a slow, peaceful ballet. Children chased butterflies across the sun-drenched lawn. Couples strolled along the paved paths, and the steady hum of a distant lawnmower was the only intrusion on the otherwise tranquil scene. For Elias, a man who had spent 40 years building a quiet, immense fortune in real estate development, this park was not just a place of respite. It was a testament to a promise he had made to himself long ago. To the casual observer, Elias was just another retiree. He wore worn-in canvas trousers, comfortable walking shoes, and a faded flannel shirt. His hair was a salt and pepper shock of wild curls, and his hands, though clean, bore the faint marks of a man who enjoyed working with the soil. He lived in a modest, tasteful home on the edge of the community, a house he had personally designed and overseen the construction of, issuing the kind of opulent mansion his wealth could have afforded. He sought a life of simplicity, and the park, with its natural, unmanicured beauty, was the centerpiece of that life. What the residents of the new community, named Whisperwood Estates, didn't know was that Elias Thorne was their benefactor. He was the one who had purchased the sprawling 100-acre tract of land, intending to build a bustling residential development. But as he had walked the property, he had found something unexpected. An old, forgotten grove of trees, a hidden stream, and a meadow that bloomed with wildflowers he hadn't seen since his childhood. On a whim, a quiet, profound decision had been made. He had carved off 20 acres, the most beautiful 20 acres, and, instead of selling them, he had held them back. He built the houses around the perimeter, created the streets and the cul-de-sacs, and then he had personally financed the creation of the park, naming it Thorne Park in honor of his family's long, forgotten history in the area. He had deeded the park to the Homeowners Association with one very specific clause: the park was to remain a nature preserve with minimal interference. He, as the sole owner of the park's original deed, held final say on all things related to its maintenance and future. He had kept this fact to himself, preferring to let the park speak for itself. But there was a new voice in the neighborhood, and it spoke with a shrill, insistent authority. Her name was Karen. Karen Miller Pritchard was a woman who believed in a singular, unyielding vision of perfection. To her, a park was not a natural space. It was an amenity, a recreational facility to be managed with military precision. She had been elected president of the HOA with a platform of community beautification, and she had wasted no time. Her first project was the park. She had a list of planned improvements: a sterile gravel-covered dog run, a perfectly manicured lawn, and a new, pre-approved playground structure. She saw the wildflowers as weeds, the old trees as potential hazards, and the quiet, shady corners as untapped potential. She carried a clipboard with her on her daily walks, taking notes on every perceived infraction, a self-appointed warden of the HOAS rules. The conflict began with a dog. Elias's constant companion was a gentle, aging Labrador named Jasper. Jasper was a creature of habit, and his favorite part of the day was his morning run in the park, chasing after a tennis ball Elias would toss into the tall grass. He never strayed far, and he never bothered anyone. One morning, as Jasper returned with a slobbery ball, Karen approached Elias, her face a mask of official disapproval. "Excuse me," she said, her voice sharp and commanding. "Is that your dog?" "He is," Elias said, leaning down to take the ball from Jasper. "This is Jasper." "Mr. Thorne," Karen began, her eyes narrowing as she glanced at her clipboard. "I'm the president of the HOA, and according to our community rules, all dogs must be on a leash at all times within the park's boundaries. It's a matter of safety and cleanliness." Elias looked at Jasper, who was sitting patiently at his feet, his tail giving a soft thud against the grass. "He's not bothering anyone, ma'am. He stays right by me." "That's not the point," Karen retorted, tapping her clipboard. "The rules are the rules. If you can't follow them, perhaps you should find another park to use. Consider this your first warning." Elias just smiled faintly, a slow, patient smile that seemed to have no effect on her at all. He put Jasper on his leash and walked away, a silent promise to himself that the situation was far from over. The dog incident was just the first shot in a long, bureaucratic war. Karen, emboldened by her initial confrontation, began to escalate. She noticed the small, carefully placed sign near the front of the park. "Thorne Park, a nature preserve." The sign was old, its lettering faded by the sun. Karen saw it as a relic, a non-compliant bit of clutter. She called for it to be removed. Then she found Elias's small, personal project, a new patch of native wildflowers he was planting near the creek to encourage local wildlife. She confronted him again, this time with a formal notice in hand. "Unauthorized landscaping," she announced, holding the paper like a judge holding a gavel. "You are not allowed to plant anything in the park without the approval of the Haas Beautification Committee. These plants are unapproved. You will remove them immediately or face fines." Elias, who had personally spent weeks cultivating the ground, looked at her in quiet disbelief. "These are native milkweed and echinacea, ma'am," he explained calmly. "They're meant to attract butterflies and bees. They're good for the ecosystem." "I don't care what they are," Karen said, her face reddening. "They're a violation. This park is a community amenity, not your personal garden." The HOA notices began to arrive regularly. Fines for the off-leash dog, fines for the unapproved plantings, fines for unauthorized picnic activities. When he brought a small folding chair and a book, each time, Elias would simply set the notice aside, the absurdity of the situation a source of private amusement. He was paying his fines, of course, a small amount that was an infinitesimal fraction of his daily income. He was simply biding his time, waiting for the right moment. Karen, however, saw his compliance with the fines not as a quiet protest, but as an admission of guilt. She began to tell people he was a troublemaker and a defiant homeowner who thinks he's above the rules. She organized a public forum to present her plans for the park, which included ripping out all of the native wildflowers and planting rows of neat, identical petunias. She wanted to show the community that she was in charge, that she could bring order to the chaos. The meeting was scheduled for a Saturday afternoon at the community clubhouse. Karen sent out a mass email, framing it as a crucial vote on the future of Whisperwood Estates. She wanted a large turnout, a public show of support that would legitimize her vision and, she hoped, finally force Elias to fall in line. The clubhouse was buzzing with activity. Most of the residents were apathetic, but the promise of a public showdown had piqued their interest. They sat in rows, sipping lukewarm coffee and whispering to one another. Elias arrived and took a seat in the back, a quiet, observant presence in the middle of a gathering storm. Karen stood at the front, a large projector screen behind her, displaying her grand plans for the park. She held a microphone like a seasoned performer. "Welcome, everyone," she said, her voice dripping with artificial warmth. "We are here today to discuss the future of Thorn Park. For too long, this beautiful space has been neglected. The HOA has a new vision, a vision of a park that is clean, safe, and beautiful for all of our residents. I have a motion to vote on: the formal adoption of the Whisperwood Estates Park Beautification Plan." She then launched into a long, detailed presentation. She showed slides of perfectly manicured lawns, sterile playgrounds, and rows of identical, brightly colored flowers. She talked about property values and curb appeal, using all the buzzwords of suburban conformity. She even had a slide with a picture of Elias's garden gnome, which she had apparently photographed on a previous scouting mission. As she spoke, people in the audience began to murmur. They had always liked the park the way it was. They liked the winding paths and the tall grasses. They liked the small wild corners where the butterflies fluttered. A few people, sensing the discontent, began to raise their hands. "I have a question, Karen," a man named Bob said from the second row. "What's wrong with the wildflowers? My kids love them." "They're not sanctioned," Karen said, her smile tightening. "They're weeds. They attract pests, and they're a visual distraction." Another woman spoke up. "I walk my dog in the park every morning. I've never had a problem with Mr. Thorne's dog. He's so well behaved." Karen cut her off. "It's not about one dog," she said, her voice rising. "It's about the rules. It's about precedent. If we let one person break the rules, then everyone will. This is for the good of the community." She then turned her attention to Elias, who sat quietly in the back. "Mr. Thorne," she said, her tone hardening, "you've been in violation of multiple rules. You've ignored our warnings. I would like to ask you, in front of the community, why you believe you are above the rules that everyone else has to follow." Elias rose slowly, his presence commanding a sudden, unbidden silence. He walked to the front, taking the microphone from a stunned Karen. "I believe there has been a misunderstanding, ma'am," he said, his voice calm and even. He didn't look at Karen. He looked out at the faces in the crowd, the people who had made their homes on the land he had once owned. "My dog, Jasper," he began, "is not a menace. My wildflowers are not weeds. I have been watching you all for months, trying to bring your vision of perfection to a place that was perfect already." Karen, her confidence returning, stepped forward. "And your non-compliance is proof that you don't care about this community." Elias looked at her, and his eyes, which had always seemed so gentle, now held a deep, unyielding authority. "On the contrary, ma'am," he said, "I am here because I care about this community more than anyone. You see, I am not a resident who is trying to break the rules. I am the man who made the rules." A ripple of murmuring went through the crowd. Karen stared at him, her face a mask of confusion. "My name is Elias Thorne," he said, his voice echoing in the room, "and I am the developer who built Whisperwood Estates. I purchased this entire tract of land, all 100 acres, with the intention of building another one of those identical suburban neighborhoods. But when I came to this corner, I saw something different. I saw a place that needed to be preserved, not manicured. He gestured to the park map on the screen. You see this park? I personally set this land aside. I personally funded its creation. I personally named it Thorn Park after my family, which has been in this area for generations. The original deed, the deed that created the HOA, specifically states that I and my heirs have final say on all things related to the park's maintenance. The park is a gift to the community, not a canvas for your personal agenda. It is a nature preserve, not a sterile recreational area. Karen's face went white. She had been so consumed by her power, by her obsession with rules, that she hadn't bothered to look at the history of the place. She had been so focused on the small print of the HOA bylaws that she had missed the big bold print on the original deed. The man she had been trying to evict from a public space was the man who had bought and created that space in the first place. So, Elias said, his voice now a quiet, powerful force. You can't kick me out of this park. I own the land. And as of this moment, I am exercising my right, as the original owner, to veto any and all plans for its beautification. The wildflowers stay, the tall grasses stay, the dog run you had planned will not be built. The park will remain as it was intended to be. A wild, living, breathing testament to the natural world that was here long before our houses were. He then looked at the crowd. And as for me, I am not going anywhere. My dog will continue to run off-leash in the meadow. I will continue to plant native species. And I will continue to sit on that old bench and watch this place thrive. Because this park, unlike everything else around it, is not a product. It is a story. He put the microphone back on the table. He didn't wait for a response. He simply turned and walked back to his seat in the back of the room, leaving a stunned, speechless Karen at the front. The room was silent for a long moment, the planned vote forgotten. The community was no longer looking at a troublemaker. They were looking at their true landlord. The woman who had promised them perfection had been revealed to be a petty tyrant, and the man who had been her target was their quiet, benevolent king. The aftermath of the meeting was a storm of whispers, emails, and phone calls. The HOA board, embarrassed and exposed, immediately called an emergency meeting. They formally voted to remove Karen as president. The neighborhood had a new understanding of their park, and a new respect for the quiet man who tended to it. The park beautification plan was abandoned, and the old sign was not only kept but was cleaned and repainted. Karen, her reign of terror over, retreated into her home. The community she had tried to control now saw her as a villain, a woman who had tried to destroy the very soul of the place. She would watch from her window as Elias, with his dog at his side, would walk through the tall grasses, a silent, humble master of his domain. The park, once a symbol of her power, was now a constant, living reminder of her defeat. It was a place of stories, and she, with her clipboard and her sterile plans, had no place in them. She had tried to own a piece of land, but she had failed to understand that the land had already owned a piece of him. And so, Elias continued to sit on his old bench, watching the butterflies flit among the wildflowers, a silent sentinel in a world he had created and, in a way, saved. The park was his sanctuary, a quiet corner of the world where he was not a developer, not a billionaire, but simply a man, and the land was a promise he had kept. The park was more than a place. It was an act of rebellion against the sterile, perfect world of suburban life, a place where a quiet man's vision of beauty had, against all odds, won out.